You think that I'm filming this review with a head cold? No, no. Superior, healthy specimen like me, I don't get sick. What the truth is, I got kidnapped by the High Evolutionary. He tried to merge me with Christopher Walken and Keanu Reeves to make the perfect being, and he wanted to create Crispiner Walken, Crispiper Walken. Yeah, he wanted to make that guy, but he failed. We teamed up, we got out. That movie's coming out in the summer. It's a very good documentary, actually, but I was poisoned and now I have a head cold. That's the only way I would get sick. But yeah, I'm doing this Guardians 3 review right now, and I've already got good news. Thor's not in it. What's up, guys? My name's Krispy. So, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is once again written and directed by James Gunn. The movie follows the Guardians as they embark on another adventure, this time to save the life of one of their own, Rocket Raccoon. The Guardians find closure with their own stories, their own struggles, and we get into Rocket's own backstory and encounter a particularly sinister face from his past. So, before I saw this movie, I heard a lot of people saying very good things about it. It was the best Marvel movie in years. Anybody who's been watching the MCU lately knows that that's not a particularly high bar to jump. Phase 4 of the MCU in general was pretty mid. I myself don't think that it's as bad as people are saying. For those of you who are Global Nerds faithful, links in the description down below, by the way, you'll know that I've actually defended Phase 4 of the MCU, and my defenses of it still stand. That being said, what did I think of Guardians 3? I think it's another really good Guardians movie. I think it's another really good superhero movie. Do I think it's as good as a lot of people are saying it is? Honestly, not quite. So I'll start with the main thing about these movies that works, particularly the Guardians themselves. The two Guardians who I think really shine in this movie are, of course, Rocket, but also Gamora. Rocket is very much the heart of the movie, particularly when we get into his backstory. I mean, the flashbacks to what Rocket went through are heartbreaking and just kind of horrifying, honestly. I mean, warning for anybody going to see this movie, there is some animal cruelty there, and anybody who is not particularly comfortable with that, yeah, be forewarned before you go into this movie if you go at all. Much like how Puss in Boots: The Last Wish before this film earned its PG rating, this movie is definitely going to earn its PG-13 rating. Kids are going to be scarred, parents are going to complain, I'm going to laugh, but people are going to be a pain in the ass as they usually are. I'm just glad that movies are actually earning their ratings after the PG-13 rating has just kind of been milked. I mean, what's PG-13 about Frozen exactly? If somebody could please tell me, I'm all ears. But it's not just the flashbacks that are the interesting point about Rocket. Are they very heavy? Yes, but they also execute these flashbacks in a way that brings Rocket's story full circle. As long as we've known Rocket, he has always been struggling with being turned into something he wasn't asked to be turned to. His whole story's been one of both letting his walls down and finding his place in the universe, and that's what I really like about the Guardians of the Galaxy as a whole. They are all misfits who were taken from their own worlds and are now trying to find their place in where they are now. I think when they deal with that theme is when the Guardians are at their strongest, and they keep that strong here, which I really like. I forgot to mention this, shameful, I know, but another one of the best things about this movie, Nebula. She is straight up phenomenal in this movie. Much like Gamora was a standout character in Infinity War besides Thanos, of course, I feel like Nebula, aside from Rocket, is probably the standout in this movie. It's Rocket, Nebula, and Gamora. They are the three best things about this movie, hands down. I mean, Nebula, she stays true to character. She's still got a lot of stoicism and bitterness here, but she's got an arc too. She has a lot of funny moments, but you see her start to I don't know, defrost, if you will. You see her heart open up and you see the impact that having this new family has on her. And she's just got a lot of moments that are funny, that are powerful, that are heartwarming, that are sad. She just runs the full gamut, and Gillan does such a great job handling that. It's amazing. But I also have to talk about Gamora. So, of course, last we saw Gamora, she got thrown off of a magic cliff and went splat. and they really do touch on that in this movie. I was honestly scared about how they would handle Gamora. You had a lot of will they, won't they between her and Peter Quill in the last two Guardians movie, and with this basically being a new Gamora, I thought they were going to do that again, and they kind of do, but without giving away too many spoilers. I really like the way they handle it and execute it, because they really lean on the fact that, again, this is not the same Gamora we knew. The Gamora we knew was murdered by Thanos. This Gamora is just fresh out of being Thanos' servant, essentially. She's still very rough around the edges. She's even evil to a certain extent. And as Peter puts it at one point in the movie, yeah, she is a bit of a dick. And again, it makes sense. Thanos groomed her, conditioned her into being a living weapon, and she's just fresh out of finding out, too, that her future self showed compassion and turned into a Nickelodeon splat for it. So she's not about to make that same mistake. Drax and Mantis are as entertaining and great and funny and fun as ever. Groot is still kind of just there. He's the auxiliary member, but hey, I like him still. It's all good. Peter Quill is Peter Quill. If you love Peter Quill, you're still going to love him. If you hate him, you're still going to hate him. If you have mixed feelings about him like I do, you're still going to have mixed feelings. This movie's not going to do a lot to change your feelings about Peter Quill, but Chris Pratt still brings his A game with the performance. I just think Peter Quill himself could be better written in certain respects, you know, more funny, less annoying, less cringe. I'm sorry, I've always just kind of thought that when they're not focusing on the strategist element of Peter Quill or the dramatic side of him, and when he's not being legitimately funny, a lot of the times he's just kind of a poor man's Sokka from Avatar. Much better character, by the way, I gotta say. But overall, the Guardians are still great, and the adventures with them are still great. And of course, this being a James Gunn movie, it is gonna have humor in it, but the humor is genuinely funny, and for the most part, it doesn't take away from the dramatic moments. The dramatic moments are allowed to play out. The funny moments are allowed to play out, and the funny moments don't usually cut each other off. I say usually because, unfortunately, James Gunn does that usual thing in his writing where he will switch from a dramatic moment to a funny moment really fast, and that's less of a tone complaint and more of an editing complaint. And the editing in this movie can be pretty jump cutty, pretty fast. They especially have this problem in the first act of the movie, where Adam Warlock invades nowhere and gives Rocket the grievous injury that necessitates them going off to save him. Oh, and don't even get me started on Adam Warlock, man. When I say that, know this. I've got nothing but love for Will Poulter. I think that guy is a great actor, and he is criminally underutilized in this movie. I was really looking forward to Adam Warlock. He's a really cool character. I really like him in the comics, and I was really looking forward to him when they teased him in Guardians 2. Unfortunately, he feels more like an afterthought than an actual character in this movie. I genuinely think James Gunn just forgot about him, and just as he was about to submit this script to get greenlit, someone reminded him that this guy existed, and he was just like, oh, there, put him there, put him there. Okay, let's get the shit started. And I genuinely think that's how it went, because Adam Warlock so many times in this movie will appear out of nowhere. He'll be there for like a few minutes, a few seconds even, and then all of a sudden, next scene, done. And if we're going to talk about another character that I've got some thoughts on, the villain. The High Evolutionary is the villain of this movie. He is revealed to be the one responsible for the experiments that turned Rocket into a talking raccoon, and what this guy did to him was horrific and just monstrous. I mean, you've got a lot of MCU villains who have some complex motivations for doing what they do. With this guy, he's just a monster. He is just absolutely monstrous, absolutely nefarious, and I think the sheer level of that really makes him one of the more memorable MCU villains we've gotten in a little bit, and definitely at least up there with Ego as one of the more memorable Guardians villains. Honestly, I think this guy's probably the best Guardians villain we've gotten so far. And I know Schaeferless already kind of touched on this, but I really like how he's kind of this not so subtle dig at Disney. And for those of you who don't remember the history, basically James Gunn, in the middle of being one of the best creators for Disney right now, Twitter troll keyboard warrior who needs to see the sun more and had nothing better to do, just decided to go looking into James Gunn's history, and it turns out, oh no, he made a few edgy jokes a very long time ago. Disney briefly fired him for that. They brought him back because they needed him, and yeah, he's clearly still got some feelings about that. And I say this because if you look closely, the High Evolutionary is surprisingly anti-Disney, to the point where I'm kind of surprised that Disney did not pick up on the commentary being made and tried to scrub that out. Like, I'm honestly surprised this guy made it the way he did. The High Evolutionary runs a corporation. They even call his organization a corporation at one point. His goal is to make a perfect utopia, completely inoffensive and flawless, that involves talking animals, basically an innocent little theme park version of life. But the problem is the vast majority of his creations and his co-creators, if you will, they can't come up with any original ideas. All they know how to do is repeat ideas that they've done before. That's totally not any commentary on the live-action Disney remakes. But the High Evolutionary wants Rocket back because of all the creations he's ever made. Rocket is the only one who's a genuine innovator, who can actually come up with new ideas. And Rocket is so obviously the James Gunn in this situation, because Disney got rid of him, then they decided to bring him back, and it's exactly the same play between the High Evolutionary and Rocket, and it's kind of a brilliant dig. I really like it. Unfortunately, that's kind of all there is to the High Evolutionary. With Ego, at least, we got some traces of depth. We get hints that he has some regret for what he does. We don't get any of that with the High Evolutionary. He has no regrets, and really he's got no character depth outside of being a complete bastard at all, and that makes him memorable, but it also makes him kind of generic. He comes across as like think Thanos if they upped the cruelty but made him less interesting. Much like the High Evolutionary, Thanos' goals are also genocidal in nature. But with Thanos, he sees it as a moral imperative because of something horrific that happened to him and his people in the past. The High Evolutionary isn't given anything close to that level of depth or motivation. He's just a dick with a god complex. And for the love of God, does he have to scream so much? I think the first scene where he starts doing that alone, he does so much of it that I was immediately just like, okay, he's just gonna be another one of those screaming megalomaniac villains. Yeah, there's a lot of those. And unfortunately, the problems I've listed are not the only problems that I have with this entry in the MCU, because it does a lot of what the MCU has usually done, and it does it really well. But unfortunately, it does repeat a lot of the formula. It does get formulaic. It does get predictable. You know that this thing is going to happen here. At this point, it's completely predictable. Right down to the third act, final battles, CGI, just boom, 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 all of that. It's still a movie that works, but I think that's mainly because of the charm of the Guardians. I guess it's kind of a reminder of how the MCU formula itself doesn't necessarily have to be problematic. I guess it's just that it sucks when it's done centered around the Avengers, because let's be real, the Avengers are kind of lame at this point. And I always found that part of what made the Guardians unique was they were the space guys, and I kind of liked them for that. But the Avengers have gone into space, other MCU heroes have gone into space, and the Guardians have kind of lost what made them unique in that respect. So this movie doesn't really have the oomph that the other two movies did. And just for the record, I really like the first two Guardians movies, and I still really like this one, but I feel like it does have problems that hold it back. And they don't make it a bad movie by any means. It's just that rather than making it the phenomenal masterpiece that this movie has traces of, that this movie has the potential to be, it's just a particularly good entry in what has become an otherwise mid-franchise. But again, the things that this movie does right, it does these things phenomenally, and I love the things that this movie does right. And speaking of which, I've got to talk about the action. The action in this movie is really good. There is this one particularly good hallway fight toward the end of the movie. And yeah, it does have an obligatory hall fight that has had to be done since The Raid, since Deadpool. And it's not as good as either of those fights, but it's done in one shot. It's epic. Each of the Guardians gets a really cool moment of their own, especially Gamora with the way that she finishes the fight at the end. Overall, this movie does have a really good charm to it. It does have a really good energy to it. And spoilers, I guess. Kind of spoilers, not really spoilers. I don't know. So this movie definitely does have a last entry kind of feel to it. The Guardians end the journey in a way that has a lot of finality to it. You do get the sense that this is quite possibly the last Guardians movie, and I gotta say, I'm gonna miss these characters. I'm gonna miss this team. I really like them. I think they are one of the stronger points of the MCU at this point. I think that the Guardians of the Galaxy movies in general, this whole trilogy, has been one of the highlights of the MCU. And I'm not just saying that because Thor's not in it. I'm saying it because I love these characters, I love the humor. Those are the things that really keep these movies strong, and James Gunn brings the A game with those strengths to make this yet another really good Guardians movie. Which leaves me with the question, where do I put this movie on the Krispy meter? Taking it out of the oven, in a good mood, I'd give it a nice 80%. Bordering on 79, but screw it, it's a good movie. Yeah, there are flaws, but when a movie is good, it's just good. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like, share, subscribe. Come join the Krispy Kingdom. We are all royals here. I also have a gaming channel that I am reviving very soon, along with my Twitch. You can find the links to the Global Nerds podcast down below. And this video is edited, as always, by the great and wonderful The Dark Gale. If you would like to work with this guy, his link is down below too. You will also find a link to a short film that I was relatively recently in, titled One Heart, written and directed by my friend Mitchie. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. This has been Krispy. And that's it. The Krisp has spoken. Take care.